Bindi is doing so much better now, so things like a lot of travel are a bit challenging for her.
Unbelievable pain. You will be able to say, hey.
Can you believe that the little girl who once stood barefoot in a zoo khaki shirt beside the most fearless man on television has grown into one of the most inspiring women of her generation? Bindi Irwin was born into a world of cameras, crocodiles, and conservation. And from the moment she appeared on screen, something extraordinary was clear. She was not simply following in her father's footsteps, she was forging a path entirely her own. Nearly 3 decades later, her remarkable journey has captured millions of hearts worldwide. The girl who grew up before the world's eyes. There is something uniquely complex about being born famous, raised in a zoo, and handed a microphone before you can fully read. That was Bindi Sue Irwin's reality from the very beginning. Born on July 24, 1998, in Boodarim, Queensland, Australia, Bindi arrived into a family already living in the global spotlight through her father's wildly popular wildlife series. Steve Irwin, celebrated worldwide as the crocodile hunter, had built a television career out of fearless encounters with some of the planet's most dangerous animals, and his daughter was present for that life almost from the moment of her birth. Those early years at Australia Zoo were not a conventional childhood by any measure. Growing up surrounded by reptiles, big cats, and the rhythms of a working wildlife facility, Bindi developed a relationship with nature that most children could only experience through a television screen. By the time she was 2 years old, she was making appearances alongside her father on The Crocodile Hunter, learning the language of conservation through hands-on experience rather than textbooks. Steve Irwin saw something in his daughter early on. During a 2002 interview, he described her with raw, unguarded love, calling her something beautiful and unlike anything else in the world. For Bindi, her father was not just a parent, but a guide into a way of living that placed wildlife and wild places at the very center of every decision. That philosophy would shape everything that came after, even through the darkest moments ahead. By 9 years old, Bindi had appeared on The Ellen DeGeneres Show, The Late Show with David Letterman, and Oprah. She launched her own wildlife series, Bindi the Jungle Girl, which earned an Emmy Award in 2008. She released a fitness album and began building a public presence that extended far beyond simply being the daughter of a famous man. Then came the day that changed everything. On September 4, 2006, Steve Irwin was killed by a stingray barb that pierced his heart while he was snorkeling at Bat Reef near Port Douglas, Queensland, during the filming of an underwater documentary. Bindi was only 8 years old. The grief that descended on the Irwin family was shared by millions worldwide, with flags lowered at the Sydney Harbour Bridge and condolence messages pouring in from governments and fans across every continent. What Bindi did in the immediate aftermath of that loss revealed something remarkable about her character. At her father's public memorial service at Australia Zoo, she stood before the cameras and delivered a tribute to Steve that moved an entire watching world. She called him her hero. She spoke of his love for wildlife, and she did so with a composure that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old carrying that weight. That moment planted a seed of resilience in the public's understanding of Bindi Irwin that would only grow stronger with time. The years that followed saw Bindi choosing continuation over collapse. She returned to filming Bindi the Jungle Girl, producing a documentary tribute to her father called My Daddy the Crocodile Hunter in 2007. Homeschooled at the zoo, she later completed a certificate in tourism and business through TAFE Queensland East Coast, building practical foundations for her expanding role in managing the family's operations. None of it looked effortless from the outside, because it wasn't. Growing up publicly after the loss of an iconic parent meant that every stage of Bindi's development was visible, commented on, and compared to a man the world refused to stop loving. That pressure would have diminished many young people. For Bindi, it seemed only to sharpen her sense of purpose. What came next took the world by complete surprise because nobody predicted the scale of what a 17-year-old conservationist from Queensland could accomplish when placed in front of a national television audience in America. The ballroom was only the beginning of a chapter that would redefine her entirely. the moment she stepped into the spotlight alone. There are events in a public life that shift everything before and after them into two separate categories. For Bindi Irwin, that event was season 21 of Dancing with the Stars in 2015. She was 17 years old, still carrying the grief of a lost father, still defined in many people's minds primarily as Steve Irwin's daughter. What she was about to show the world had almost nothing to do with crocodiles or khaki uniforms. Paired with professional dancer Derek Howe, Bindi moved through the competition with a combination of technical growth, emotional openness, and sheer likability that audiences found impossible to resist. Week after week, she matched the energy of performers with years more experience and the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life being filmed in high-pressure situations. Her scores rose consistently, her connection with the audience grew, and then she won. Bindi and Derek Howe won season 21 of Dancing with the Stars, making her the first Australian celebrity to claim the Mirrorball Trophy. She also set a record at the time with 8 perfect scores, surpassing the previous record of 6 held by multiple former competitors. She shared the record of being the youngest celebrity winner alongside Shawn Johnson, who had also won the competition at 17. That victory meant something beyond entertainment. It was the first time millions of viewers outside Australia had seen Bindi fully in her own right, not as a memorial to her father, but as a living, growing young woman with her own charisma and her own story. The dancing itself was almost secondary to what the show communicated about who she had become. She was warm but grounded, emotional but composed, joyful in ways that clearly came from somewhere genuine rather than performance. The dancing competition also introduced the world to a relationship that would define her personal life in the years ahead. Bindi had met Chandler Powell in 2013 when he visited Australia Zoo as a tourist, and she gave him a tour. Chandler was 19 at the time, a professional wakeboarder from Florida who had been competing since he was 15 years old. The connection between them was immediate, but practical circumstances meant months of long-distance communication before anything developed further. By the time Bindi appeared on Dancing with the Stars in 2015, Chandler was in the audience cheering her on, and they were officially a couple. Chandler eventually retired from competitive wakeboarding in 2016, relocated to Australia to be with Bindi, and fully committed to a life of wildlife conservation at Australia Zoo. What started as a tourist visit became a complete reinvention of his life's direction. He gave up a professional athletic career built across years of dedication. She welcomed him into a family institution and a mission that carried the weight of her father's entire legacy. On Bindi's 21st birthday in July 2019, Chandler proposed. The announcement landed on social media with a warmth and simplicity that felt completely aligned with who Bindi is publicly. What had started with a zoo tour by 2 teenagers had grown into something that would carry them through the most testing period of their lives together. The wedding itself became one of the defining moments of an already eventful few years. Originally planned for April 2020, the ceremony was shifted forward by a matter of weeks when the COVID-19 pandemic began sweeping the globe. On March 25, 2020, hours before Australian government restrictions would have prevented it entirely, Bindi and Chandler married at Australia Zoo in a small ceremony attended only by her mother, Terry, her brother, Robert, and John Stainton, her late father's best friend. There were no crowds, no large celebrations, just the people who mattered most, surrounded by the wildlife her family had dedicated generations to protecting. Exactly 1 year later, on their first wedding anniversary, Bindi gave birth to their daughter, Grace Warrior Irwin Powell. The middle name Warrior was chosen as a direct tribute to Steve Irwin's Wildlife Warriors conservation mission.
Bindi Irwin has given birth to her daughter, Grace Warrior Irwin Powell. She explained the meaning behind her daughter's middle name, Warrior, saying it is a tribute to her late dad, Steve, and his legacy.
Grace's arrival represented a continuation of everything the Irwin name had come to stand for, and Bindi embraced motherhood with the same visible joy and openness that had defined every previous chapter of her public life. The personal story was beautiful. The public story was inspiring, but beneath the surface, something had been quietly stealing years from Bindi's life, and it would eventually demand to be brought into the open. What she revealed next would change not just the direction of her story, but the lives of millions of women watching from around the world. The health battle that changed everything. There are struggles that happen privately for years before they become public, and the longer they remain hidden, the heavier they grow. Bindi Irwin's battle with endometriosis had been building since she was 14 years old, quietly shaping her daily experience with pain that doctors repeatedly dismissed, minimized, or attributed to nothing more than the ordinary experience of being a woman. A decade of suffering passed before she received any real answers. Endometriosis is a condition affecting roughly 10% of women of reproductive age worldwide, in which tissue similar to the uterine lining grows outside the uterus, attaching to ovaries, fallopian tubes, and surrounding pelvic tissue. It causes severe chronic pain, particularly around menstruation, and in many cases goes undiagnosed for years, because symptoms are frequently dismissed by medical professionals. Bindi's experience followed that pattern with painful precision. In a February 2025 episode of the podcast, A Life of Greatness, she described the years of being told there was nothing wrong. Doctor after doctor reassured her that what she was experiencing was simply part of being a woman. She recalled becoming progressively more unwell while being repeatedly dismissed, with the pain extending beyond physical suffering into nearly every corner of her life. In March 2023, Bindi went public for the first time, sharing on social media that she had been diagnosed with endometriosis and had undergone surgery. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Women across the world recognized their own experiences in her description. The Endometriosis Foundation of America honored her advocacy with the Blossom Award at their 12th annual Blossom Ball in May 2024, recognizing her contribution to raising visibility around a condition that remains chronically underdiagnosed and underfunded globally. But the surgeries were far from finished. In May 2025, the day of the Steve Irwin Gala in Las Vegas, Bindi was unable to attend. She was instead in New York, having flown there after a grumbling appendix finally reached a crisis point. Working alongside Dr. Sekin at the Sekin Endometriosis Center, she underwent surgery that removed her appendix along with an additional 14 endometriosis lesions. This was on top of the 37 lesions and cyst that had been removed 2 years earlier. A large hernia acquired during the birth of Grace was also repaired during the same procedure. She shared a video from her hospital bed shortly after coming out of surgery, expressing gratitude for the medical team, for her family's support, and for the kindness of people who had reached out. The honesty of that post, filmed less than an hour after surgery, was entirely consistent with the Bindi the public had come to know. No performance, no careful management of image, just transparency about a real experience. By March 2026, posting during Endometriosis Awareness Month, Bindi shared the full extent of what her body had endured, writing that she had over 50 endometriosis lesions removed across multiple surgeries, that a chocolate cyst adhering her ovary to her side had been removed, and that she had also undergone an appendectomy and hernia repair. She accompanied that disclosure with a message to every woman experiencing similar pain. She wrote that no one deserves to suffer in silence, that if you are in pain, she believes you, and that finding answers is worth fighting for. That message resonated at a scale that even she may not have anticipated. Bindi's willingness to attach her name and face to a conversation that many women still find difficult to raise with their own doctors created a public shift in awareness. Her story gave language to experiences that had previously gone unnamed for countless people. The courage required to film yourself in a hospital bed and post it for millions of followers while your family is across the country hosting a gala in your father's honor is not small.
Bindi Irwin is on the mend after she was unable to make an annual event honoring her late father Steve Irwin due to a health emergency. The 26-year-old shares an update on her hospitalization, revealing that she is now in recovery.
Her mother, Terry, spoke to the media about Bindi's recovery in May 2026, confirming that her daughter was doing so much better and that the healing process was ongoing. Terry noted that the demands of long-haul travel made the journey from Australia to Las Vegas too much at that stage of recovery, and that caring for wildlife at home was, in a meaningful way, less taxing on Bindi's healing body than intercontinental air travel. The family's unity throughout the health crisis was evident in every public statement made during that period. Bindi's journey with endometriosis did not diminish her transformation story. It became a central part of it. What she modeled through years of illness, dismissal, and ultimately advocacy was a version of strength that had nothing to do with performing wellness. It was the kind of strength that shows up honestly, admits difficulty, and then turns personal experience into a resource for others. Who Bindi Irwin is today and why the world can't look away. There is a particular kind of public figure who earns admiration not through spectacle, but through consistency. And Bindi Irwin has become exactly that. In 2026, at 27 years old, she stands in a position that could not have been fully imagined when she was 8 years old, delivering a memorial speech for her father. She is a wildlife conservationist, a mother, a health advocate, an author, a television personality, and a businesswoman whose identity has been shaped by grief, love, illness, and purpose in equal measure. Life at Australia Zoo in Queensland remains the foundation of her daily existence. She and Chandler work alongside her mother Terry and her brother Robert in one of the most recognized wildlife facilities in the world. Their daughter Grace, who turned 5 in March 2026, is already spending time around the animals that shaped every previous generation of the Irwin family. Photos shared by Bindi in January 2026 showed Grace engaged in daily wildlife care at the zoo, a visual echo of images that defined Bindi's own earliest years. Robert Irwin followed his sister's footsteps onto Dancing with the Stars in 2025, and the Irwin family temporarily relocated to Los Angeles for 3 months in September 2025 to support him through the competition. Robert went on to win the Mirror Ball Trophy in November 2025, making the Irwin family the only family in the history of the show to have 2 separate siblings claim the trophy in separate seasons. The overlap of those victories created a renewed wave of public affection for the entire family that extended well into 2026. Bindi's advocacy work continues to grow in parallel with her conservation role. Her platform on social media connects her with millions of followers who came to know her story through the endometriosis disclosures and continue to follow updates alongside the wildlife content. That dual identity, conservation work grounded in her father's legacy alongside deeply personal health advocacy, has created a following that feels invested in her as a whole person rather than simply a public personality. The financial dimension of Bindi's life reflects the scale of what she has built. Celebrity Net Worth estimates her net worth at approximately $5 million as of 2026, derived from Australia Zoo operations, television work, merchandise, and the broad commercial footprint of the Irwin family brand. What that number represents beyond money is the sustainable infrastructure she and her family have built around a conservation mission that could easily have faded following Steve Irwin's death in 2006. The fact that it has grown stronger rather than diminished is a direct result of the choices Bindi, Terry, and Robert have made consistently across 20 years. What the internet sees when it watches Bindi now is not merely the transformation of a body or a style or a public image, though all of those have changed visibly across the years. What it sees is the transformation of a grieving child into a purposeful woman who refused at every turn to let difficulty reduce her. She was handed a public life at birth. She lost her father before she turned 9. She won a dancing competition at 17. She built a marriage from a zoo tour. She welcomed a daughter named Warrior. She endured a decade of undiagnosed pain and then used that experience to give voice to millions of silenced women. That is not a story that can be manufactured or marketed. It has to be lived, year after year, in front of cameras that were rolling before she could ask for them to stop. Thank you for watching. Now you know the full story behind Bindi Irwin's incredible transformation. If this video opened your eyes to a side of her you hadn't seen before, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. And if you want to keep discovering the real stories behind the people the world can't stop watching, subscribe and turn on your notifications because there's a lot more coming your way.